John Fund and I wrote a book about this a couple of years ago, and the book is filled with cases and prosecutions from all over the country. The Heritage Foundation, where I work, we've started a database. It's got relevant cases for, excuse me, could you all go outside and speak, please? Thanks. We started a database because I got tired of hearing this constant, there's no voter fraud in the country. And we've been putting recent cases up. And these aren't allegations. These are where a court has convicted someone of voter fraud. We're up to 400 cases. And a reporter for, I think it was NPR, called me about 2 weeks ago to talk to me about this very issue, about how there's no voter fraud in the country, right as I had on my desk an opinion I was reading from the Sixth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals, in which they confirmed the convictions of 3 individuals for stealing votes in an election in Kentucky that was won by 3 votes.
Oh, my word.
One of the big issues we've got in this election is the problem of non-citizen registration and voting. There are cases of this all over the country, and Secretary Ray, I wanted to ask you about that. Arizona is one of the few states in the country that has actually passed a law that's trying to do something about this, right?
Actually, we have a very tough law in Arizona where we check citizenship, U.S. Citizenship upon voter registration. So when you're registering to vote, we make sure that you're a U.S. citizen. And just to kind of give you an idea, does that system actually work? We know it works because just last year we had 1,700 voter registration forms that were kicked out because there was not proof of U.S. citizenship. And we give people the opportunity to come back in and then provide that citizenship. And how many people do you think came back in?
I would say probably almost none.
Yeah, 0 came back in. So, and that's good because, and to go back to what you said, people ask you all the time, where's the proof of voter fraud? You actually, yes, there is proof out there, but I always say to them, you don't want to see proof. What you want to see is you want to see your secretaries of state catching it on the front end to making so that there isn't fraud.
Right.
We want a system where there isn't fraud, and you don't want to have convictions in court. We want to be catching the people before fraud ever even happens.
Right, and something that you all should know, I've written a great deal about this over the past 2 weeks at a National Review where I'm a contributor. It's very clear that the administration wants to prevent states like Arizona from being able to enforce their law that requires proof of citizenship. Because what's happening right now is there are 4 states that have passed this kind of a law: Arizona, Kansas, Alabama, and Georgia. And Kansas sent a request to the U.S. Election Assistance Commission. This is an independent federal agency. They are in charge of the federal one-page voter registration form that you can use to register. And they sent a request in saying, will you please change the instructions on your website for anybody using this federal form to tell them that if you're a resident of Kansas, when you fill in this form and send it in, you're also going to have to provide proof of citizenship. They were sued by the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, a number of other groups, and they asked for a temporary restraining order to prevent the EAC from doing this. And the U.S. Justice Department came in, and instead of defending the EAC, they came in and tried to throw the case so that the League of Women Voters would win. Now, fortunately, the judge saw through that, refused to issue a TRO, but in another week, there's going to be another hearing because they've asked for preliminary injunction to stop it. So the point is the administration does not want states verifying the citizenship of people who are voting. Right. So that's a real problem, and what you all will be able to do is also going to be dependent on the results of this lawsuit, right?
It is. We're waiting to see what happens with Kansas and Georgia. And the point in Arizona is, and it's hard for us, for Arizonans, is we're stuck between 2 laws. We're stuck between a federal law or a decision that President Obama made that says that there's a federal form, and we're stuck between an Arizona law where Arizona voters have said, we require proof of citizenship in Arizona. So as Secretary of State, where I'm sworn to uphold the laws, I'm in kind of between a rock and a hard place because I have a federal law and a state law that conflict.
Right.
And so, yes, we're very interested in this case, obviously. Of course, I hope Kansas and Georgia prevail, and then we would be following suit, asking the EAC for the same sort of waiver to be able to,
right,
to also have that disclosure.
And by the way, on this, a very funny moment happened in court on the 22nd when I was there. The league and others were saying, oh, this isn't a problem. And Chris Kobach, Secretary of State of Kansas, your fellow Secretary of State, told the judge about the fact that in just one county in Kansas, the local county election officials went to a U.S. Naturalization ceremony. So they went there because they wanted to make sure that once people had sworn the oath and become U.S. citizens, they got registered to vote. Well, it turned out that a dozen of the individuals there who were naturalized didn't need to get registered to vote because they already were registered to vote and, in fact, had voted in prior elections in Kansas when they weren't U.S. citizens. So that's a real issue and a real potential problem. Now, I know one of the other things I think that is a problem is duplicate registrations between different states. And the fact that it's very easy in this country to register in more than one state, and your chance of getting caught are pretty nil. Now, I know you all are trying to do something about this. You've just joined this interstate cross-check program run by Kansas, right?
Well, it is, yes. We are part of that where we can bounce the address information back and forth across states to see if someone's registered in other states. And we see part of this is not someone setting out to do fraud. Now, a lot of this is accidental. I mean, let's just face it. You move from one state to another, Hans. You're into voting and fraud issues, so you're probably going to pay more attention to this than most people. But most people, when they move, it's kind of the last thing on their mind is to update their voter registration. So we want to make it real easy for them when they move into another state and they re-register to vote. If you're registering in one state, it's canceling out in another state, or at least these states are alerting each other so that the records are kept clean. And being part of this interstate cross-check system is really beneficial. Kansas started it, and I believe there's 28 states that are participating.
Right. But some of the biggest states, like New York, don't want to be part of it. New York's also one of the states that—
Or California.
Yeah, that refuses to put in an ID requirement. Now, I know you all also have had a problem with absentee ballots, right, in Arizona?
Oh, we have a huge problem with absentee ballot collection. I mean, absentee ballots by themselves, the mail-in ballot system, I'm a very big supporter of because it increases turnout and our citizens seem to really enjoy having that option. But, okay, but we have a very large problem with ballot collection, people going door to door in Arizona, knocking on doors, especially in low-income areas or in areas where English is a second language, and collecting ballots from people, saying, hi, I'm here, and many times lying and saying, I'm here with the county recorder, or I'm here from the Secretary of State's office, and I'm here to collect your ballot. And it's gotten to the point where we've actually had people turn in thousands of ballots at the polling places on Election Day. We've tried to close that loophole in the law that allows an individual to turn in multiple ballots at the polling places with not any success. Because every time we go to close that loophole, people get, the left gets very upset about that. I am stunned that this still happens in Arizona. We're the only state that still allows it. But we have photographs of people pulling up to polling places, popping the trunk of their car and carrying in laundry baskets full of live ballots. And it's perfectly legal. And they walk in, they drop them off, and you know, they said, when you interview them and ask, what are you doing with all these ballots? They say, let's get out the vote. It's our get out the vote efforts. We're doing a community service. And it needs to be shut down, but we haven't been able to do it yet. And that's one of the main reasons I was so excited to be able to chat with you today. So, because any help that we could get spreading the word on this and and maybe ways that we can tighten that loophole that we haven't previously thought of in Arizona. Any advice is welcome. Put your thinking cap on.
Right. Now, we'd be happy to answer any questions. I mean, those, is there any other topic you wanted to bring up?
I think that's the most important one in Arizona right now. We're a leader in some things. We were the first state to have, to show proof of citizenship when registering to vote.
Right.
We're the first state to bounce the information against MVD voter records so that we know if someone's a citizen when registering to vote. So we've been a leader in some things, and then we're behind in other things too. So we've got some catching up to do in some other areas.
Well, I know one of the issues that, I'm actually from Texas, but I also am in California, but in a town called Redlands area, the U.S. congressman that won there, they couldn't believe that the Democrat won, so a bunch of the Tea Party people went around and got the list of people who voted, and they found a lot of people were voting, hundreds of them were voting over 100 years old. And, did you hear that? Over 100 years old.
Yeah, no, I
They're voting
heard,
from the
right.
grave. And also that they found a lot of people, when they asked them if they voted, they said no, they didn't vote. So somebody else voted for them. The other thing they found was a lot of illegals voted that weren't there. I mean, the whole thing was very chaotic. One of the problems was they couldn't get enough people to actually walk the streets to find, oh, they found people voted from empty lots.
Right.
And weird, like, business places where, you know what I'm saying? And if that happens, it's this nice little town of Redlands, California, it happens everywhere. And you'll notice that it happens a lot in, like, a toss-up area for
Right.
U.S. congressmen. Or if you look at all the states that are supposedly toss-up, they all tend to go Democrat. Isn't that ironic? Did you notice in Obama's race, they all went Democrat except for one, I think. And there were like 8 or 9 toss-up states, 10.
Well, see what
Why
you're...
do they all go one way?
Well, part of the problem that you're pointing out is that it's extremely tough to put the genie back in the bottle after an election. That's why you need provisions in place to try to deter and stop the kind of fraud that goes on. Everything from requiring voter ID to proof of citizenship, because once an election has occurred, it's extremely difficult to go back and check the voter registration list and find out all the bad registrations of people who actually live in vacant lots, things like that. Most election officials don't have the time or the resources or the interest in doing that. And that's one of the reasons you've got to try to put measures in place ahead of time to try to stop that.
I'm going to take up all the questions here, but I'm a presiding judge in my county, in Travis County, which is
Right.
Austin,
There
Texas.
was a couple of questions back there.
Go ahead, Vincent.
Yeah, Michael.
You talked about, the secretary, you talked about the collection of ballots, and I know Arizona has a lot of elderly voters. Does that kind of thing go on in nursing homes or in senior living places as well? Do you have any problems with that kind of issue?
Well, sure. I mean, there could be, the argument is made every year when I try to pass the law that says to stop this, that what about in elderly care facilities? I would point to 2 things. First of all, every other state has elderly care facilities and gets around and somehow get their elderly citizens get a chance to vote. But more importantly, that ballot got to the citizen in the first place through the mail. These are mail-in ballots, and the system was set up for them to get to the person via the mail and to go back via the mail. That's actually the way the system works the best. And so for somebody to say that a collection activity is going to work better, you know, that why can't somebody just go drop it off at the front desk of the senior center or wherever where the mail is picked up? I mean, that just doesn't. That'd be easy enough to do.
Yeah.
That's how mail is picked up. I mean, how do people pay their bills? Just why is a ballot so different?
You had a question, I think, right? Yeah, right. Anyone else?
If I did, I forgot what it was.
Well, I'll just say what I'm
Oh, wait.
going to say.
Yes, ma'am.
You guys are talking a lot about like people that go out and vote and not check the process. very easy passwords, this and that. And not only that, he got into the state one.
Yeah, security, unfortunately, is a real problem with state computer systems in the election area. That's why I have regularly testified against pushes by some state legislatures. I did this recently in Virginia, for example, to allow voting over the internet for folks overseas. I mean, it's a really, really bad idea. The problem with a lot of states are going to online registration. If they don't have good security measures in place, yeah, that could cause a lot of problems. And you know what's so interesting about this is about 15 years ago, California formed an internet voting task force. This was the first one in the country to take a look at internet voting and whether it should be done. And everybody thought that California, being the heart of Silicon Valley, they brought all these, some of the leading computer scientists in the country in, and everybody thought they would come out saying, oh, this is a great idea. You know, we should do this, it's going to increase turnout, it's going to be wonderful, people will be able to vote from their homes. All of the computer scientists recommended strongly against internet voting because they said the security on the internet, and particularly with the hardware and software that's ubiquitous that we all use, is so bad that it's extremely dangerous. And that's why we have not switched over to internet voting, and we shouldn't do it because it's so potentially dangerous.
How about rigged machines?
But, oh,
Rigged voting
yeah.
machines, where all the votes come out for one particular candidate or party. Happened in Detroit.
One of the things I obviously can't speak for Michigan, but I can speak to what we do in Arizona because I know that we're very, very sensitive to our equipment being safe in Arizona. And we've got a really good system. We test every single piece of voting equipment before every single election. And we set it back to, if it's a counting machine, we set it back to 0. It's a logic and accuracy test. Then we seal that piece of equipment up, and then we put video cameras on it in whatever county it's in. So, and the counties are in charge of putting that video camera on it. And then it's on a live feed so that everybody can watch it, log in at any time and watch it. We actually did have problems in one of the counties, which was caught by a constituent watching the video camera. He was able to take the clip and send it on Facebook up to the Secretary of State's office. But the point is that using technology with video cameras and all this, we're able to make it even more, make things even more accessible to the citizens to help us oversee everything. But I was surprised when I became Secretary of State when they say, oh, all the equipment's checked in Arizona. It really is. I've actually now gone out and done it myself. And we have 4 big elections in Arizona this year. We will be going and testing all the equipment 4 times. So several thousand pieces of equipment 4 times this year. I was amazed. We take it very seriously in our state. I would urge, and I urge, I'd like to say that it's generally the redder the state is, the more it seems like their ballot equipment is tested and sealed.
And I have to excuse myself.
I'm really concerned about this on this Democrat.
Well, and I don't like to.
Most of the fraud is.
I wouldn't say that it's, you know, I won't say that a Republican secretaries of state do it better. I'll just say Republican secretaries of state do it really well.
They're more concerned about it. I've got to run, and I apologize.
I'm going to run
but
with you.
I got to go.
Thank you so much.
It was good to have you. So I'm sorry.